No pictures.
Okay, welcome to week 2 of the Ultimate Coder thing. We're just going to get off right here. Everything's got to start with good design. So when we started thinking about bringing Stargate Gunship to the perceptual computing camera, the first thing we have to go back to is like root interface design and making sure that we are not bringing presuppositions to the conversation. So for one thing, things that work with touch are cool. They're a huge distance from what you get with a mouse. But we started to realize that the nature though of touch even sort of like takes what we already know from a mouse and from a keyboard and tries to bring it forward. And we saw some guys doing a tablet app recently where they were doing a first-person shooter for the iPad, and it looked so cool because they had done something with a shooter that I'd never considered. Is they decoupled the camera from the aiming, and so all of a sudden they've redone what you sort of intuitively expect from a shooter and make it intuitive again. So with perceptual computing, we wanted to go back down to the studs and say, what do I really want out of this game where I don't have to touch anything? One of the things that's really on our mind is a lecture Gabe Newell gave. He's the guy up at Valve, and they were talking about why they weren't really interested in things like the Kinect. And he talked about latency. He talked about the amount of distance I can cover with my thumb as I'm using a D-pad or a joystick is so much faster and so much more responsive than anything I can do on Kinect with my arms. And it's just a matter of physics. It's like I've got all of this meat to move, to go, whoa, and do all that, where all this is sort of really twitchy. That got us thinking about Stargate Gunship and the parts of it that we want to be really responsive, specifically the aiming. And aiming, we figured, was best done on the tablet with you touch, you sort of drag where you want it to go. But we think that really the ideal place for aiming where you're shooting your guns is going to be to track independently of the camera and follow your eyes. So that becomes one of the key components that we're working on, is where do we map specific inputs to the gestures or the inputs with that perceptual computing can bring that's the most useful. So with that in mind, we want to try to map the right controls to the right thing. We've got some really cool tools here, the eye tracking, the gesture tracking, voice commands, and we want to try to use it all appropriately. And so here's where we're kind of headed for, is we want to use the eye tracking to figure out where I'm shooting. We are going to decouple shooting from the camera, so where I'm looking may or may not be where I'm shooting. It's not always the center of the screen, right? So my camera can be here and seeing a certain view, but I can shoot at the corners, so they're disconnected. The other thing is we thought we would use simple gestures like maybe swiping or thumbs up or whatever else to be the fire and turbo. So we've got an afterburner that makes your ship go faster, and we've got obviously the shoot command. We thought about using it where you lock your gaze on an area and somehow that activates shooting, but the problem with that is, again, latency. Is if I have to wait from I'm looking here to I'm staring here, I'd lose at least a half a second, and that's not cool in a shooter game. So we're going to have to use some kind of a gesture, probably a thumbs up or a pound my fist or something that makes for shooting. That gesture is going to be tough though, because you're shooting all the time. And so unless I can do something that doesn't require a whole lot of motion, I'm just going to get sick and tired of it. And I'm going to get exhausted. So we have to figure out something there. Maybe a constant gesture like this is shooting. We don't know. We're still working on that, and how the camera responds. Voice commands become the place where we can do everything else. So that becomes switching weapons, bringing up the menu. Those kind of things are best suited where I want to shoot it. So cannon, bomb, BFG 3000. Being able to say those things brings the weapon I want, and actually it could be faster than what we have in touch and be more responsive still. So that's what I wanted to talk about this week. We'll keep it short. It's going all the way back down to core interface design and how we're going to make the most of this freaking awesome camera. We already been through this step and you saw it in Ultimate Coder 1, where we had to reimagine what does touch mean, especially in multiplayer for wind-up football. This is, again, the same thing. We already did the touch thing for Stargate Gunship, and it already works great on a tablet. But now, what if we went one step more and made it all Minority Report? And for one thing, we'd all look like Tom Cruise, and that would probably get us paid better. Is that the end?
Guess so.
Okay.
Except that Gavin didn't say a word.
So that's my part. What does Gavin want to say?
Have
Anything to add?
I mean, like...
Anything at all? Any little bit of wisdom?
Do you want me to hit you?
On camera, we'd get points.
No.
20 points.
I was just thinking, like, a way to, I guess, analogize it would be like the rail shooters that you find in arcades, where you have what?
What's a rail shooter?
A rail shooter is where your position in the level is fixed and where you look is fixed, but you can shoot anywhere on the screen. It's like a shooter.
Time Crisis?
Yeah, like Time Crisis, exactly. That would be a rail shooter.
Okay.
Your movement through the level is fixed, where you're looking is fixed, and they just send wave after wave of enemies after you. So, in terms of the way that you aim is decoupled from where you're looking in a rail shooter. That would be very similar to our control style here, where except instead of holding a light gun, you're holding a light laser beam vision or whatever.
That's all like Godzilla.
Exactly. So, but then we're also potentially giving them the ability to look around the level as well. And so, how that works, that's really what we're getting is how do you turn the player into the light gun, and how do you give them the ability to look around the level and still decouple like on a rail shooter.
Honestly, I think that the looking thing, like tracking, aiming with looking, is actually going to wig people out, and it's going to take a degree of getting used to, because that is so unseen before. I have no experience with that, and I probably won't trust it at first. And so we've been thinking about an object on the screen that just tracks where you're looking, some sort of a GUI element to show this is where I'm shooting, and hopefully that will build the confidence and the interface feedback, so people say, okay, whatever I'm looking at, this thing's tracking me, and they'll start to feel it. It'll be interesting in a 3D plane as you go from short distance to longer distance how that plays, but it'll be a hoot. So I think that's basically what we wanted to talk about. We're going to continue going through the individual steps as we go through Ultimate Coder. And Lee, dude, like, how much did you have to write? Seriously.